Welcome to Jewish Cinémathèque, where we meet some of the important faces involved with films that tackle aspects of the Jewish experience. Today I'm joined by actor Moshe Lobel, whose breakout performance in the film Shtetl has been called masterful and captivating. The film focuses on a shtetl, a small market town in Ukraine near the border with Poland. Jews live there with much back and forth, squabbling and so on, but still there was some general ease under the Soviets. However, 24 hours later, on June 22, 1941, as part of Operation Barbarossa, Nazi Germany invaded, and life as it was in the village would end. The film is about one day in the life of this small Jewish community, the day before that invasion.
Tata?
Gekommen, geben Schulm oder ist gekommen, sich zu gesegnen?
Beide.
Положил нам товарищ Ленин, и которым ведет нас товарищ Сталин.
Wie wird sich jetzt leben?
Prachtig. Grandios. Щасливе життя. Але війна наближається.
Класс нуждается в вас. Освободитесь от июльника, этого архаичного языка.
Zeit. Es geht vor. Ja zijn holen. Italiaans. Vermaakt zich alle mens.
The film won the Audience Award at the Rome Film Festival. French director Adi Walter constructed a makeshift village in northern Ukraine where the film was shot. He did so with a largely Ukrainian crew just months before the 2022 invasion by Russia of Ukraine. In order to retain the film's authenticity and realism, most of the dialogue is in Yiddish. Moshe, who grew up in an insular Yiddish-speaking Satmar Hasidic community, was just a natural to play the lead role of Mendele. He had left Borough Park, Brooklyn, to study at Yeshiva University, and then, after a few years of study, went off to join the theater. Shortly thereafter, Lobel made his theatrical debut as Ralph in the new Yiddish Reps production of Clifford Odets' Awake and Sing. He was also involved with Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish, that took New York by storm in 2019, and was Laser in the Keith Thomas Yiddish horror film, The Vigil. Shtetl also stars Saul Rubinek as the Rebbe. Moshe, welcome to Jewish Cinémathèque. It's really a pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure to be here.
So this film is about a young man who leaves the shtetl, leaves behind the love of his life, goes to Kiev, and joins the Red Army, and then decides to return home, maybe because he's learned that his wife is now betrothed to someone else. That must have been a very strange thing for you as somebody who also left your community. How did you connect with that role, and how did that feel for you as someone who has left the Hasidic world?
Well, as you said, he's left everything behind, including his love. But there's, when you leave a place or a world, the first thing you want to do is run as fast and as far as you can. And I think that was my experience at first. I had a friend in our community in Borough Park, a Hasidic kid, who during my teenage years, when I'd already kind of left the Hasidic community, he would tell me, once a Chassid, always a Chassid. And that actually would make me pretty angry when he would say that. But maybe it made me angry because there was some truth to it. But I didn't feel it at the time. I didn't want to speak Yiddish. I didn't want to be involved, connected to that world, to that identity at all. After some time, especially as I started to reconnect with my native language through Yiddish theater and film, I really started to appreciate the nuances of having kind of that, this culture, this language, this world is actually the foundation of who I am. I mean, when you speak a language for the first 12 years of your life, that is such a huge part of you, and you can't run away from it, nor should you.
And it's not just a language.
Yeah.
It's just all-encompassing.
Exactly. But I would say language itself is all-encompassing, right? I think I'm going to go off on a tangent here, but the Yiddish language so often, unfortunately, in pop culture is treated as this kind of bit of nostalgia. Very often is just a punchline. Everyone knows oy vey or whatever. I grew up saying oy vey, but it was actually something serious, right? Or oy vey or oy. It was a real part of our daily expression, but it was also like everything from the moment I woke up till I went to sleep. Everything I thought was in Yiddish, and even my dreams were in Yiddish. When I cried out to my mother, it was in Yiddish. When I thought, what am I going to have for lunch? It was in Yiddish. And so you can't really run away from that. And so it was just great to reconnect with that. And, ever since I started to reconnect with that part of my identity, I had been grappling with trying to navigate that balance of being in the world free and not really tethered to this community or even most of my family, but still feeling spiritually kind of connected. And so when I got this script, first of all, it blew my mind because it was like it was written for me.
In some respects, it's your story.
Yes, in some ways, but not just on the surface, because there are many differences, especially on a surface level. But the underlying issues and the way that the character tries to navigate them felt very familiar to me, and also kind of an opportunity for me to actually get to explore these questions, which I didn't get to do in that explicit of a way before.
So when you were 14, you broke away. I imagine at that point your English was not particularly good.
Yeah, starting at 12, I started to break away. And my English, I was lucky that I grew up a bit bilingual, mostly speaking Yiddish, but I was, for the first 6 years of my life, I lived in New Jersey in a town in Lakewood where people spoke Yiddish and English, and even in Satmar in New Jersey, they had to bribe the students to speak Yiddish. You would get a soda can every month if you spoke Yiddish, which of course I got every month, because but most of my classmates were speaking English at home.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you sort of broke away, and
Yeah.
what drew you? I mean, you decided to seek an education, a secular education at Yeshiva University.
Yeah, it was even before that. You know, I was in a, so my transition out of that world was gradual. It started at 12, but you know, it took. I went to a couple of different schools over my teenage years, and
By your choice or by your parents' choice?
by my choice. And I was in a yeshivish school for high school for 3 years. At the end, after the third year, I realized that I want to go to college, and this high school was not conducive to that. So I think it was already September, school had already started. I did some research and I found a modern Orthodox school in the Five Towns. And I wrote,
Long Island.
yeah, and I wrote to the staff there and I said, I made my case. I said, this is my story. I've wanted an education my whole life. I know that school's already started. I don't know how I'm going to pay for this school, but please consider me. And
Wow, what a leap.
yeah,
Whew. And where were your parents when this was happening? Supportive?
my mother was, yeah, but my father, I hadn't spoken to my father at that point. He disowned me when I was 12 and tried to take it back, but that relationship really ended when I was 16. So yeah, I just knew what I needed, and
you went
I
to
went
high school
for
there, and then you
for 1 year, yeah, and it was kind of strange because everyone was checked out. It was the last year of high school, and I was like, I'd been fighting. Yeah, I'd been fighting for
every
this.
single bit of.
Yeah, I got to study earth science and history and literature, and it was really exciting for me. And then I got to college, and I was still very overly enthusiastic, and maybe too much because I ended up taking too many courses. And the only place that I kind of succeeded was in the theater
At YU?
at YU.
So you were involved in some theater productions.
Yes.
You sort of found your place.
Yeah.
And then what happened then? You decided to go out into the real world, so to speak, or the new Yiddish rep?
Yeah. I didn't make it through college. After 2 years, I was having a really hard time. But then I was on leave, but then I kind of stuck around to play in the theater in YU. So I was doing producing, stage management, sound design, acting, everything. But eventually I just kind of, I don't know, I was trying to find different jobs. I was like...
There are a growing number of
Yeah.
young men and women who've decided to leave that world
Yeah.
and have found their place in theater, which is quite amazing. And now Yiddish, I totally agree with you. Yiddish is often considered, but as movie makers are turning to Yiddish for realism, this is a language that was spoken, so I have to make this film in Yiddish. You're really you're quite a commodity at this point. You are a big attraction because you are not like some of your co-stars in the film, forced to sit and learn a language you don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, it's really unimpressive that I got this job because I was probably the only person qualified to do it.
But wow, what a job you did. Your acting was superb.
Thank you.
As a matter of fact, I was with, a bunch of friends when we saw the film in the theater, and the women were just, he's gorgeous.
It's funny because people do come up to me afterwards and they'll be like, you look better in person, but you look taller in the film.
So talk about, the role. They came to you, you're saying you were the only one. That's not true, you know that. But
meaning I was the only one qualified in the sense that at my age, speaking fluent Yiddish and also having the experience that I'd had at that point, the professional experience. So that combination, I think, I was probably one of few people who had that. But it did get to a point where it was, obviously it was an acting job. You treat it as a character, you treat it as storytelling. You're not thinking this is me and I'm just going to be myself. At the same time, so there's that craft element to it, but at the same time there's the emotional and personal element to it, where I did actually exchange certain experiences with the character, where I feel like I borrowed some revelations from him and gave him some moments. And one of the moments that are really me in the film is when I'm singing in the synagogue. That wasn't in the script. In fact, most of the singing in the film was not in the script. It just kind of
This is
happened.
when you're in the synagogue and the Rebbe comes walking in
Yes.
on you. And you're all alone when you're singing in the shul. But what are you singing?
I'm singing Kabbalah Shabbos prayer.
Okay.
So the story with that is that I actually, so that, for logistical reasons, I had to be alone in the synagogue and the rabbi would find me there. And this was like 4 weeks before production. And I told Adi that I suggested that I should sing a prayer. And he said, that's a great idea, and we'll do it in color. And he just kind of had this,
Yeah, just to explain to the audience, film was shot largely in black and white, but the shots that were flashbacks were in color.
Yes. But that's the one kind of exception to
The
that.
exception.
And I instead of finding some tune that would be accurate, a nusach that would be accurate to that time and place, Adi wanted me to bring something that was personal to me.
Moshe, you speak about being in the shul, being in the synagogue by yourself and singing Kabbalat Shabbat, singing the Vishamru from the Friday night service. And the Rebbe at a certain point will walk in. Let's just take a look at a clip from that.
Wie kann man vergessen, unsere Stimme? Genau. 2 Jahre. Mendel. 2 Jahre. Nein, bleib. Bei Nummer, sie gewähnt Tage deinen Platz, nein? Bist gekommen für was, Mendel? Bist gekommen, geben Schulden oder bist gekommen, sich zu gesegnen?
Beide.
Beide. Nein, beide, nein. Ich habe gehört, als ich gesagt habe, zu Kino. Ja, ich weiß.
Wieso?
Ein kleines Stadt. Es ist ein kleines Städtel. Es ist ein Schuhet, Mendel. Es ist nicht gewesen, du, kein Schimmrebbe, das ist gekennte Ziehbinden zu der Gemorre.
Then I went on my journey traveling across Ukraine. I was doing a lot of research and talking to people and finding different towns. One of the towns were Berdichev, a famous Hasidic town.
Which is where my mother-in-law, actually, his family comes from, but okay.
Really? There are many Jews left there, and it's basically a place of pilgrimage now. But there's a Chabad, and the Chabad rabbi invited me to stay for Friday night and join them for dinner.
Wow.
And he insisted that I lead the services because they couldn't have a minyan in shul at the time. And
And this was the first time you had led services since you were
basically
a teenager.
14 years old. I had first refused because I don't pray. I didn't want to kind of be forced into it. Usually when Chabad people on the streets of New York ask me if I'm Jewish, I often say no, just to avoid that. But actually, at some other town, I put on tefillin, and in that town, I ended up leading the services Friday night. And I got to this part of prayer, Vishamru, which is the end of Kabbalah Shabbos, the welcoming of Shabbos, and it just hit me that this was something that I actually looked forward to when I was a kid every week, I
Best
found
service
it to
of the
be
week.
so beautiful and haunting in a way, and so I knew that would be it, that I had to bring it. So again, that's one of those situations where we had this exchange of, you know, where I ended up putting that into the movie and giving that to the character, but also I had the opportunity to reconnect with something that was really important to me and beautiful to me that I would never have done, you know, in another circumstance. I would have said, no, I'm not going to do the prayers, but just because it was kind of my job to do this preparation, and so I got to.
And he was willing to work with you, Adi.
Yeah. I mean, he was a documentarian first, and I think he really wanted to. A lot of what he wanted to do is capture something real. Yeah.
Adi decided to use a one-shot editing. Can you tell the audience what that was like for you? That's not easy to act in that situation, where basically the camera's rolling.
Yeah. I would say the opposite. It's easier to act that way.
Tell me why.
Because usually a scene is filmed broken up into beats. So you often don't even get to experience a full scene continuously. You know, you have a couple of lines, half a page, you'll move the cameras and do another. Here, we really got to just immerse ourselves in the moment and experience, so it's not a real one shot, it's like about 35 long shots stitched together. So it's a full scene or a series of scenes back to back continuously. And that's just such a treat as an actor. Yes, it's a lot of work, a lot of preparation, but that's another bonus. Like that, having the opportunity, having the time to put in that work, to develop the scenes, to really think about every moment as you go through it, so that when you do it, kind of like live theater, everything is kind of set in motion, but it's in your bones. You just do it, you just live it.
And you didn't feel you
That's
needed
incredible.
that break to go to the trailer and have a cup of tea and then come back an hour later to shoot the
I
next.
hated breaks. Yeah, because I didn't want to lose momentum. Sometimes you do have to wait while they set up the next thing, and I would just run around in circles. I would write in my, I had a Yiddish journal that I was writing in. I was reading, I was listening to music, some music from the score actually that he'd been working on. But I would never want to rest, because that's a detriment to an actor.
The young woman who played your Basherte, the woman who you were fated to marry, or you believed you wanted to marry, or actually who loved you. The two of you loved each other when you leave the shtetl. She apparently, she's Ukrainian, but apparently has some lineage, maybe a grandfather who was Jewish, but she knew no Yiddish. So what was that like, working with an actor? Basically, this is the woman who you're supposed to have a relationship with, who can barely communicate in the language that is natural for you.
Yeah. Well, my first day of work on this film was after flying for like 20 hours and getting to Kyiv. I woke up the next morning and we had these chemistry reads with a couple of finalists for the role. And we went through the first one, and she was fine, she was great, but...
her name is Anicia
Stasevich, so she was the second one, and we just kind of had this... She wasn't even reading in Yiddish at that point. She knew her lines in Ukrainian, and I was doing it in Yiddish, but we just kind of connected, and we had this... She wasn't playing it as like a damsel in distress or this kind of typical way. You really had this feeling that this is a woman who wants something and has agency and is someone that even I can lean on, so it's not this kind of typical old Hollywood version of, and we do see that in the film at some point. I literally lean on her.
We don't want to give away that. but there's the beginning and the end where there's so much chemistry between the two of you, and then there's really very little being together through most of the film.
Yeah, and then I knew immediately that she would be the one, and Adi agreed, and then I found out that her grandfather was named Moshe, and he spoke Yiddish, and owned a strip club in Odessa. So
Odessa
Yiddish-
was quite a city
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
Jews back then.
So, I mean, yes, she didn't speak Yiddish, but it was in her blood. It was in her DNA, and yeah, her Yiddish was phenomenal in the film, and but we became great friends, and as well as Petro Linovsky, the Ukrainian actor who plays Demyan. So we actually spent.
Who's your buddy?
Yeah, and the three of us.
Actually, in the picture, it's the two of you walking across that
Yes,
bridge.
exactly. And we met 6 months before production, and we hung out in Kyiv. We were FaceTiming and
Speaking what language?
English.
You spoke English.
Yeah, but we would also work on our dialogue, and I was studying Ukrainian. They were studying Yiddish. So yeah, but we really developed this true friendship and chemistry.
There's a history of Ukrainians not particularly loving the Jews, particularly around World War II.
I would say there's a history of nobody loving the Jews around World War II. So,
Fair
I
enough.
wouldn't single out specifically Ukrainians on that.
What was it like? I guess there was no sense whatsoever of any threat from Russia at the time. There was. So there was concern that Russia might invade. I mean,
We almost didn't make this movie.
This is 4 months. You finished, I think, 4 months before the Russian invasion?
6 months.
6 months.
Yeah. We're finished production.
Yeah.
Post-production was still going on in Kyiv
In Kyiv,
in February of 2022.
as the invasion began.
Yeah, in fact, at some point there was an issue because they had very bad internet connection after the full-scale invasion, and they had to get data back and forth between Kyiv and Paris. And but yeah, they almost did the invasion April of 2021. Troops and tanks were already lined up at the border. And for a moment, we really thought we wouldn't be able to make the film. And then we went ahead and, the thing is, what's interesting is that I put so much effort and research into trying to understand what it is like to live on the eve of a catastrophe. What do you know? What are you thinking about in your day-to-day? Because it's even if you have a certain kind of awareness that something might be happening, you're not going to be thinking about it every day. What is it like? And then there I am, and I didn't realize it, of course, until after the fact. But I was actually living that. I was there, and we were nervous, but mostly I was worried about this job.
Right.
And I think that is the reality of any kind of life and any point in time when something like that is about to happen. War is not something that feels relevant. It doesn't feel like something that exists in your world, in your universe, until it happens. And so that's what we see in the film, where they're discussing a lot of things, debating things, and we do have some
Feminism, communism, Zionism.
Yeah, and even this question, the Germans are mentioned a few times. There's kind of murmurings of things, but we don't know, and we don't necessarily want to think about it. We don't want to talk about it. We have more pertinent things in life than this abstract reality that is like an alternate reality.
How are your cast members doing now? They're safe?
I mean, what is it? Is it safe to live in a city that's being bombarded literally every day? No. I mean, I do know of one of the crew members who I didn't know personally, who helped to create the synagogue, who was killed in action a few years ago. There are some of the actors, some of the crew are in the front lines. And Anisia is in Kyiv, and she's between Kyiv and Odessa, actually, where she's from. And there's just bombardments every day, and it's rough. It's really hard, and of course, and her family actually, some of her family went to Israel, and now
Really? Interesting.
now they have bombardments there too. So
Yeah.
it's yeah.
There's so much to talk about. We could go on and on and on. The film is called shtetl. There's an E missing in the shtetl, and my understanding that Adi decided to remove it because he took something from Georges Perec's La Disparition, the Disappearance,
Yeah.
a novel that he wrote in 1969, where he removed the E because
Because he felt like,
it felt like it, but it was
but
like
it was actually a
something's
part
missing.
of a movement of restraint writing in the 60s, and he chose to write a novel without using the letter E, and of course it's been analyzed to death for decades.
I
And,
can imagine.
but he did lose both of his parents during the Holocaust, his father in the war, his mother in Auschwitz, and yeah, the missing E is kind of can refer to the missing they in Europe, which is felt if anybody's traveled in Europe. I definitely felt it when I was in Ukraine, going through these towns where it was really like, oh, where's all these people? Where's this life that was so
So rich
prominent
and so
and rich here? Yeah, so that's what it's referring to, and that's the void, I guess. And Adi wanted to pay homage to that.
The film is called shtetl, and I must tell you, it's a powerful, moving film. So wonderful to see a Yiddish language film, and there are many of them now. And I can only imagine, Moshe, that we're going to be seeing a lot of you in the coming years. We look forward to that. Thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you.